this round. For this round, the motion that we are going to debate is, in cases of sexual harassment, this House would significantly lower the standard of evidence required to prove the crime. From the government team, we have a team from Department of Electrical Engineering with Ms. Yamina as the first speaker, Mr. Jeffrey as the second speaker, Ms. Nabila as the third speaker, and for the reply speaker, we have Mr. Jeffrey. From the opposition team, we have a team from Department of Chemical Engineering with Mr. Husi as the first speaker, Mr. Azhar as the second speaker, Ms. Janita as the third speaker, and for the reply speaker, we have Mr. Husi. Now, I will remind everyone about the rules of today's debate. The rules are: one, each substantive speaker will deliver their speech for 7 minutes and 20 seconds. Reply speakers will deliver their speech for 4 minutes and 20 seconds. And on substantive speakers, we will send a chat via Zoom on the first minute, indicating that POIs are allowed, on the 6th minute to indicate POIs are no longer allowed, on the 7th minute, and multiple times on 7 minutes and 20 seconds to indicate that the speaker must end their speech. On reply speech, we'll send a chat via Zoom once on the 1st minute, on the 3rd minute, on the 4th minute, and multiple times on 4 minutes and 20 seconds to indicate that the speakers must end their speech. 6, no POIs are allowed in the reply session. If there are any called POIs, may the current speaking team answer it first, whether it will be yes or no, and then they may continue with their speech. Without further ado, let's start the debate. First of all, I will make sure the connections from both of the teams are pretty well. Each team may turn on their camera and make sure the microphones are functioning well. The first speaker from the government team, can you try to check if you are audible?
I'm sorry, but can I turn off my camera since my internet connection is not pretty well, and I'm afraid if I turn on my camera, it can disturb my speech.
Adjudicator, is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. Second speaker from the government team, you may check your connection and mic.
Test.
Okay. Third speaker from the government team. You may check if your mic is audible.
I don't think she heard it. Maybe you should
continue. Okay, I'm just going to go with the first speaker from the opposition team. Can you check if your mic is audible?
I'm audible.
Yes. Okay. Second speaker from the opposition team.
Hello, I'm the third speaker from the government team.
Okay.
Is my speaker audible?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
To give you a heads up, if I'm lacking in my audio is lacking, I'm currently having double device.
Oh, okay. Is the second speaker from the opposition team's mic working well? Okay, then we're just going to check when he's about to do his speech. Third speaker from the opposition team.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are. Okay. So I call upon the first speaker from the government team, Ms. Yamina. You may start your speech.
Okay, I'm from the first speaker of the government team, and my pronunciation is my pronoun is she or her, and my POI preference is through Zoom raise hand. Okay, sexual harassment is a very concerning issue existing in the current status quo, in which, as we can see by today, the number of sexual harassment cases not even decreasing, but instead increasing, but with the very least amount of those cases can be proven in court, and the perpetrators will be arrested or given the at least consequences created by law. Moreover, the very complicated regulations of law and the still questionable output it will brought and the high risk it took if the victim brought the case to the court make most of the sexual harassment victims are silenced. And even in the very worst In the very worst, they will start blaming themselves for the case happening. How pathetic, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen? So we, as the government side of the House, stand with the motion of, in cases of sexual harassment, this House would significantly lower the standard of evidence required to prove the crime itself. To prevent further misconception, let me first define the motion in which significantly lower the standard evidence that we meant in our side of the House is that we lowering the required evidence to bring the case to the court, but not the quality of the evidence itself. So the goal in this debate is that there are two main goals in which first, we will be sided with the victim of sexual harassment and creates a greater awareness towards the existence of sexual harassment itself in the very first place. And second, creating a greater deterrence effect for perpetrators to prevent repeated or even worse case in the future. So there are two big mechanisms that we will bring. The first is we will be lowering the amount of evidence with still maintaining the quality of the evidence. This means that it doesn't mean that we will take all evidence to court, but we will still filter which evidence is valid and should be taken to court itself in the very first place, ladies and gentlemen. And the second, we will still give the counterbalance narrative in proving the cases, such as we will still use the court system where there are juries as the neutral person and perpetrators still given time to prove that they are not innocent, and so on and so forth. So there are two main arguments in the first is the points of urgency on why is it urgent to be done and implemented, and the second is justification point on why is it justified to be implemented. In the justification point, there are three sub arguments that I will bring. Okay, let's move on to my first argument on why is it urgent to be done and implemented. In the matter of sexual harassment, ladies and gentlemen, the biggest problem is the lack of possibility it could be proven, because as well as we all know, the parameters of sexual harassment itself is still debatable. And its initial parameter to say that person is getting sexual harassment is if they are feeling harassed, then it is in the very first place is included in sexual harassment. And in the very first place should be clarified, because at the point someone feeling the feel of feeling like unsafe or so on and so forth, it already violates their hak asasi manusia of feeling safeness in the very first place, ladies and gentlemen. And in the point of and moreover, in the case of sexual harassment, right now it's already normalized. Like, for example, in the term of normalizing sexual harassment, because of the lack of evidence that existed in the current status quo, when the victims are trying to convince people around them that they are experiencing sexual harassment, even the people around them are still questioning them, like, are you real? Is it really sexual harassment? Because of the lack of evidence that they have. People are and moreover, like, for example, if there are many cases where the victims are trying to prove that they are being sexual harassment and they want justice from themselves, and they go to court and or maybe they go to police, even the police station still questioning, like, this is not sexual harassment. You still have lack of evidence. This creates this thing creates a bigger concern because if this thing repeatedly happening in the current status quo, the parameter of people feeling that he or she are being sexual harassment is even pushed beyond their limits, and by this, even the victim, in the very worst case, can start to even questioning themselves, like, am I being sexual harassment? Meanwhile, they are being sexual harassed, and why this is and why it's the point of urgency should stand. And the second, why is it justified to be implemented? The first, the initial function of law and how it's not aligned with the current status quo happening. Law, in the very first place, ladies and gentlemen, is used to enforce the victim protection, in which this doesn't happen in the current status quo. Why is that so? Here's the thing: in the current status quo, where the evidence required to prove a sexual harassment case is very complicated. Like there are so many evidence that needed to prove, or at least to bring the sexual harassment case to a court. This proven that even the system is not sided to the victim. like even the system, by making the system this complicated for a victim, it could it we could say that even the system are protecting the perpetrators by saying that the evidence the evidence that are the evidence that are brought by the victims is very low, and so on and so forth. Why and why and by this it could create furthermore worst effect. Like for example, if we keep the current status quo system where we keep on demanding for a complicated evidence to bring a case to the court, it could make the awareness of the sexual harassment is even decreasing Like for example, for example that I have said it earlier, like even the victim in the very first case can start questioning themselves. Are they being sexual harassed or no, ladies and gentlemen? And the second, it could giving the deterrent effect it needed to further prevent the wrongdoings. Why is that so? Because if we lowering the evidence needed, ladies and gentlemen, even the smallest case of sexual harassment can be brought to the court if the evidence is valid. And by this, the perpetrators could at least are experiencing the feeling of they are being judged, or at least the victims could still memperjuangkan their justice, and so on and so forth, ladies and gentlemen. And by making the perpetrators experiencing the consequences that they have done, it could create the deterrence effect for themselves and for the people in the surroundings, so that it could create a greater awareness that, oh, this thing is also a sexual harassment law. Like even if like people said like I think it's not sexual harassment, but if the court if the court stated that it's a sexual harassment and there's the consequences that it could give to the perpetrators, it could create a greater awareness, and it could create a deterrence effect. So at least in our scenarios, it could give a deterrent effect for the perpetrators. Meanwhile, in the opposite side of the house, what if we keep on using the system where the evidence where the lacking evidence is still used, the perpetrators are being protected, and they could go with a more worse doings in the future. And I think we should stand with the.
The first speaker from the government team spent 8 minutes and 55 seconds. I call upon the first speaker from the opposition team, Mr. Husi. You may start your speech.
Okay, give me a moment. Let me start my speech. Sorry. My preferred POI would be you can turn on your mic and say POI directly. Okay, I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. Standing here as the leader of opposition would debate under motion. In case of sexual harassment, this House will significantly lower the standards of evidence required to prove the crime, ladies and gentlemen. Now, first, as the first speaker, I would send some rebuttals towards the government side of the House, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, the government side of the House keep championing, keep saying that the law is not enough in the first place to prove whether if this if this somebody is getting sexual harassed or not, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, we say that the law in the first place, ladies and gentlemen, is not perfect in the first place, ladies and gentlemen, because we say that the law is a very complex system that needs a lot of consideration towards in making it, ladies and gentlemen. We say that the law is not can only sided into one certain of group of people, ladies and gentlemen. The law should be universal towards and applicable towards to all of the stakeholders in the society, ladies and gentlemen. That's why we say the law and judgment in the law is very complex and needs a lot of consideration, ladies and gentlemen. We say that it can't be implemented right away in a snap of a finger. That's why we say that the evidence is still needed by the is still needed to prove the guiltiness of this crime maker, ladies and gentlemen. And they said also the evidence quality, ladies and gentlemen. They will consider more on the evidence quality, ladies and gentlemen. First, ladies and gentlemen, we didn't see that how they define this quality, ladies and gentlemen, whether it is good quality or bad quality, ladies and gentlemen. We say that in our definition, quality is defined by the amount of evidence that you have provided to the law, ladies and gentlemen. We say that if you provide enough evidence, if you provide enough evidence, the amount of evidence needed to prove that whether somebody is guilty or not, we say that the quality of the evidence is okay, ladies and gentlemen. We say that why also this the amount of evidence is needed to prove the quality of the evidence, because we say that the amount of evidence can give out the perspective of different side of these cases, ladies and gentlemen. That's why we say that the evidence of the law that they're bringing is not valid, ladies and gentlemen. Now they say that in the first, there's also they also bring up about the questionable people that question themselves, am I being harassed or not, ladies and gentlemen. We say that they're questioning themselves because they're being hujat by the society, ladies and gentlemen, right? Okay, when they hujat by the society didn't believe them in the first place, because we say that there are a lot of false accusation that is made because of this sexual harassment, ladies and gentlemen. We say that sexual harassment is a very serious thing, ladies and gentlemen, and many society, we say that a lot of society is trying to utilize this the sexual harassment cases to bring up a certain case, or maybe to set up a people which it will be unjust in the first place in the for the victim to be set up, ladies and gentlemen. We say that this is unjust for the people who has been falsely accused of this sexual harassment. Now, towards the mechanism, they say that they were significantly lower, ladies and gentlemen. They didn't also define this significantly, ladies and gentlemen. We didn't see that how they define this significantly, ladies and gentlemen. We say that this significantly should be considered into a lot of many things. Is it fulfilling the parameter of law? Because we say that the judgment in law is very complex and needs a lot of consideration. We can't just implement it right away, ladies and gentlemen. That's why you need a lot of amount of evidence to prove whether these people is guilty or not, ladies and gentlemen. And also, if what if somebody is getting a false accusation, ladies and gentlemen, but already been punished, that would be really unjust towards the victim, ladies and gentlemen. Now, proceeding to my arguments, we say that first, the urgency. We say that the sexual harassment is happening everywhere and it is urgent and something. But we didn't think that lower the evidence can solve this problem, ladies and gentlemen. We think that the status quo law is working, ladies and gentlemen, and there is no need to modify it. Now, first, why it is unjust to lower the evidence. That second, why it is justified for us to stay in status quo, and third, I will be talking about the impact, ladies and gentlemen. Now, towards my first argument, why is it unjustified in the first place, ladies and gentlemen? Ladies and gentlemen, we see that this sexual harassment has been a problem, a really big problem to every layer of society, ladies and gentlemen. We believe that it is necessary for the law to work and justify those victims who have got a rights. We agree on that, ladies and gentlemen. We also see that throughout the cases of harassment, especially that is brought up to the law, we also need evidence to prove in order to justify whether this action is considered as harassment or not, ladies and gentlemen. That is the role of the evidence in the first place, ladies and gentlemen. Another problem arises, ladies and gentlemen, where we see that the sexual harassment as the serious law, ladies and gentlemen. Some people are utilizing this moment, trying to maybe set up or false accusing one people, ladies and gentlemen. We see that this, like the racism case, ladies and gentlemen, when this racism case, let's say there's a police seeing color skinned people reaching out for something they think is a gun. That's the case that we are facing right now, ladies and gentlemen. False accusation from each layer of society, ladies and gentlemen, especially between genders in the society, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we say that these people are using this choice to set up people towards the crimes of this harassment, ladies and gentlemen. That's why we say that lowering this evidence needed to prove whether the victim is to prove whether the villain is guilty or not. We say it's not justified. First, we say that it can be used instead of it can be used as a weapon instead of a proof to act of justice. It can easily utilized by everyone just by accusing someone that they have done the sexual harassment. We know that and we also know that the punishment of this crime is not easy and light, ladies and gentlemen. Not only that, we say that the law will also we say that under the law, they will also will get cancelled by the society, ladies and gentlemen. That's why we say that the law is enough by itself, ladies and gentlemen. We also have this cancel culture, ladies and gentlemen, which we believe doubles the punishment towards the villain, ladies and gentlemen. So that is why we believe the evidence that has been determined by the law or the prosecutor in the first place, ladies and gentlemen, is enough to prove whether these people is guilty or not, ladies and gentlemen. Also, under the scenario of these false accusations, such as Gofar Hilman, ladies and gentlemen, recently he was accused for sexual harassment in a club towards a girl. And in the end, he was proven not guilty towards it, ladies and gentlemen. But along the process, ladies and gentlemen, he was falsely accused towards the cases, ladies and gentlemen, that they make him suffer a lot, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the second, I'll be talking about, the law is working, ladies and gentlemen. The law is enough. Ladies and gentlemen, the law is doing their job as it's supposed to be, ladies and gentlemen. We didn't see any urgency coming from the government side of the house. They said we should lower the evidence, ladies and gentlemen. We said that the evidence is very sensitive thing, ladies and gentlemen, which can determine and prove somebody's acts if she or he is guilty or not. It can change the course of his life whether he is guilty or not, ladies and gentlemen. We say that it is not necessary for the law to be lower, ladies and gentlemen, even though it takes a long time and needed a long process towards in the law, ladies and gentlemen, we said that it is justified because a law is itself is a complex system, ladies and gentlemen. We can just be undone in the instance at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. The law still need process. Second scenario, even if the law is not working, ladies and gentlemen, we don't need the lower the evidence significantly, ladies and gentlemen. We have this LFM that provides the aid, rehabilitation aid, and support towards the victim, ladies and gentlemen. We said that there is enough, and also we also have cancel culture that is enough to justify the feelings of the victim in the first place, ladies and gentlemen. That is all for my speech. Thank you.
Okay, the first speaker from the opposition team has spent 8 minutes. I call upon the second speaker from the government team, Mr. Jeffrey. You may start your speech.
Oh yeah, wait. Okay, I'll start my speech in 3. Oh ya, my POI preference lewat chat aja atau reaction. My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Before I continue to some of my extensions, I would like to bring a few rebuttals towards the opposition side of the house, right? So the opposition side of the house, first of all, they talk about how the law should be universal, right? They should cater to all stakeholders, and so that's why they believe that we should just stay in the status quo where it is so hard for the sexual harassment victim to bring up the crime to the court, right? And here's the thing, like what I've already talked about before, what they want that is fair to all stakeholders. It in the status quo, in fact, it is not fair. Why? Because the law process of sexual harassment is still too hard, and that's why we believe that it is urgent to lower the evidence, quantity, right? But not only that, I think that it is a bit too idealistic if they want to be fair to all stakeholders, to be universal, right? I think that it is too idealistic, and that's why I believe that it is better to just try to save more lives rather than try to save all, right? And that is going to, and I'm going to explain that in my extension later. So, and then next, they're talking about how in law the quality of evidences are actually the quantity, right? The more someone have evidence, then the more high quality the evidence, right? But here's the problem. Let's just say that the evidence, there are many, but most of them are sketchy, or they are not easily believable enough. Don't you think that in the end the evidence quality will be still bad, ladies and gentlemen? And that's why we believe that's why it is better to just lower the quantity, right? That's why we believe that the number of evidence isn't the quality of the evidences. That's why we, as the government side of the house, we believe that it is better to just lower the quantity, but still keep the quality parameter, right? Because we still need some believable evidences. For example, chats that really have the perpetrator's name in it, for example, and clear evidence that the perpetrator do sexual harassment, for example, or signifies that. And that's why we believe that our side parameters still stand, right? And then next they are talking about how it is not necessary to lower evidences because the current status quo, even though the law process is long, it is still already enough. But here's the problem, right? What we know currently is that the people that actually speak up about their sexual harassment is still a bit too low compared to the population of for example, like Indonesia, right? For example, take example Indonesia. And here's the problem. It is more likely that there are a lot more sexual harassment victims, but they are not brave enough to talk about it, to bring it up, and the few people that actually brings it up and actually brought to court, there are some of the lucky enough to actually have the evidences. But the problem is that sexual harassment evidences are very hard to get, right? And that's why we believe that it is actually in fact justified for us to lower the evidence standard, right? And then they also talk about how they should still protect the people that could be falsely accused. I will be talking about why it is, even if there are some who are falsely accused, it is still okay in my extension letter, right? So continuing to some of my extensions, I will be bringing three extensions in the terms of justification. One is about awareness, and then second, utilitarian concept, and then third is that the victims have endured enough, right? So the first one about awareness, we believe that it is justified for us to lower the standard because the moment we bring a change to the laws of sexual harassment, it will bring an awareness to the people currently. Why do the government make a change to the sexual harassment law, right? For example, like maybe it is actually a prevalent problem in the current status quo, and that's why people who previously think that it is just a few exceptions as actually a thing that actually happens at large scale, right? And that's why we believe that it is justified for us to lower the evidence standards. But why is it not enough in the current status quo, right? For example, like the current momentum in, for example, social media, where people are actually beginning to be more brave to speak up, right? It is still not enough. Why? Because it is still going to attract those people who actually have enough evidences, right? And even if there are some people who don't have enough evidences, but they are already brave enough to speak up, in the end, there are still many more people who want to speak up. Why? Because the current momentum is still not enough. They still need a realistic prospect of them getting justice. For example, like it is possible for them to bring up to court and then have their evidence being accepted and the perpetrators being punished, right? And that's why we believe that it is justified for us to lower the evidence standard of the sexual harassment law, right? And then second, about utilitarian concept, we believe that we as the government, we should try to protect more people, that to protect as many lives as we can, right? And by lowering the standards of evidence needed for these sexual harassment cases, then but by doing this, we can get a lot more people to speak up, for example. But not only that, it is also easier for the the perpetrators to be punished, for example, for them to be proven guilty, for example. And that's why we believe that it is okay, right? But not only that, second, about how the victims have entered enough, right? Like sexual harassment is a very big problem. It has existed since a very long time, and it is seen as, and some layer of society thinks that it is normal. For example, like they gaslight the victims that, oh, it is normal, it is nothing, right? And that's why we believe that it is okay for us to sacrifice to it is okay if some people are falsely accused, because at least we already protect the people who have suffered long enough, right? And that's why we, as the government, we have the duty to protect them. And so that's all I'm proud to propose. Thank you.
Okay, the second speaker from the government team spent 7 minutes and 24 seconds. I call upon the second speaker of the opposition team, Mr. Azhar. You may start your speech.
Firstly, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Honorable adjudicators, the other side of the House doesn't clearly explain how they are, at what point they are going to lower the quality of evidence, and didn't explain the way they are going to lower it. I think you should not believe on their cases, because they themselves clearly doesn't understand how they are going to applicate their way. Excuse me, the time. And I'm going to move into my rebuttal. My first rebuttal is the other side of the House keeps stating that they will going to lower they will not going to lower the quality of evidence, as if it is exclusive to their side of the House, which the truth is the quality of evidence is supporting our side of the House, because quality of evidence happens surface because there are high standards of evidence to be put. If the other side of the House say that they will not lower the quality of evidence, they cannot explain how quality of evidence will surface more rather than trivial evidence, when the standard of evidence is significantly lower. They didn't explain how it will happen. How can they make sure the quality of the evidence surface? Quality of evidence exists on our side. The problems that they are having, they will lower the quantity, but they cannot make sure how the trivial evidence will surface. The trivial, even if they have a way which they clearly didn't explain, how can they make sure the cases with trivial arguments didn't surface? And those trivial arguments will create a lot of problems, like confusion of cases in the court and false accusations. And this false accusations case is really threatening on the society and on the court itself. And they also stated that they are going to enforce protection, but with that kind of regulations where everyone can just state that they are being sexual harassed. They want protection. They want this going to court, and because of the low standard of evidence, these cases can surface and push aside the real cases of sexual harassment. That there is going to be a problem. Before I move into my arguments, is there any QI? Okay, I will first move into my arguments. My first argument is that lowering the standard of evidence would not create a safe environment for the people. Firstly, let's applicate their case with the standard being lower in the court. in the short term, yes, there will be increasement on the reporting, but it's not always a good case. The reporting on false accusation would become so easy that if it increases as well, it will overwhelm the real sexual harassment case. It will overwhelm the court and weaken it, because all those reporting are going to be handled, right? The court will use their time to handle false accusation case. Furthermore, it will also decrease the competence of the judge. And the worst one is real sexual harassment cases will take longer to be handled because all of the surfacing trivial cases. And if the false accusation surfaces to the media, the case of sexual harassment would be more even complicated. And what they are always bring, it will make the victim questions. And this particular problem, if the false accusation surfaces to the media, it will make a bad label for sexual harassment cases, and will make a bad label for the sexual harassment. And even more, they will keep and it will worsen on the psychological side of the victims. Why it's better case if we stick to the status quo and should improve the law system. The laws are supposed to enforce justice, and to enforce justice we have to with the enforced justice, the law should improve on itself, not being lowered. Why is that? Because if we try to lower the law, it means the law will be weakened, and the handle on the future case of sexual harassment will be much weaker, and the other side of the house cannot explain how the law cannot be weakened by it. And there are also three stakeholders that are going to be impacted if the standard of evidence for sexual harassment are lower. The first stakeholders is the accused. With the lower standard of evidence, the people will be more fragile for the false accusation. For example, people can report a case just because they are met for their boyfriend, and easily make a narration and accusation with him, because it is of accusation. And the court will be a battle of emotional, because the victim can play on the emotional side with the evidence being lacked, and they can manipulate the narration, and it will be an unfair case for the accused. Therefore, that is why we believe that the accused will the court ground will be an emotional battle. Who can bring a good narration with little evidence? The victim of plain victim are at advantage. Here they create a deadly narration, while the accused are only have the weapon of evidence. It is unfair for the accused, and also it is going to be bad for the victim itself. As I already explained before, it will create a more bad environment, and the victim itself, their problems will be pushed aside, and with the social pressure, the victim will not create a great environment for the sexual harassment on a great environment on the societal side. That is why we oppose.
Okay, the second speaker from the opposition team spends 7 minutes and 31 seconds. I call upon the third speaker from the government team, Ms. Nabila. You may start your speech.
Okay, so my PR preference is by chat, and my gender pronouns in she, her. So, and I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Sexual harassment includes unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical or sexual nature in workplace or in learning environment. And sexual harassment sometimes is considered very common and a part of being in a social environment. For example, in Indonesia, the issue that we're facing in the sexual harassment is in the university, which the perpetrators is the lecturer themselves or the education to the student with the fear of not passing the class or get lower grades because they cannot please the perpetrators. Sexual harassment causes the victim many mental health. They become anxious, they become scared, they become to feel unprotected. Moreover, improving sexual harassment is being so many things that sometimes we cannot even have a record of it. In the current status quo, where we need so many proofs to protect ourselves from sexual harassment, is making the perpetrator more easily get away with their crime. And the law should not do that, right? Law should protect who they are supposed to protect. And in this case, it's the victim that we are need to protect. And if we only look on the view that yes, by lowering the evidence, we causes more new problems, but it's our current status quo. But our current status quo is very problematic. Sexual harassment also over time can evolve to larger crimes like rape, stalking, or even murder. There is this case in South Korea where the victim first involved the authority and accused his boyfriend in doing unwanted sexuals, but because it's her boyfriend, the authority did not do much, and the lack of evidence also only closed the act as unpleasant acts. But when finally the authorities have enough evidence, it's too late. Her boyfriend already raped and murdered her, and this is proof. That if we can prevent the crime from the first time, we can protect the victim, and the case would not, and the victim would not die or being raped in the first place. As my first speaker has already stated, that lowering the amount of evidence, we still maintain the quality and the validity of the evidence, because sexual harassment evidence is very hard to find. Sometimes people that surround the victim did not even notice the crime is being done, and the possibility that the perpetrators can be punished is very low, which make the victim fall into despair and feel that the existing law cannot protect them. The amount of the evidence that being need to prove in the crime also burden the victim. The deputy of leader from the government side of the house also stated that the utilitarian concept, with even the utilitarian concept is not enough. Why? Because if it is okay for us to sacrifice a few people to protect all sexual harassment victims. Sexual harassment is a very big problem ever since a long time ago, and many fallen has victims into it. Sexual harassment has been seen as normal, creates a generational mindset that what is actually sexual harassment and what is seen as not. The second speaker from the government side of the second now getting onto my rebuttals. The second speaker from the opposition side of the house has stated that the government side of the house did not make any mechanism. But I think the second speaker has failed to pick up that the government side of the house already stated lowering the amount can actually increase the quality of the evidence. The opposition side of the house, the opposition side of the house also failed to give up any proof that maintaining the standard can protect our victim from crime. False accusation can happen, but by maintaining the quality of the evidence itself can prevent that from happening from the first place. And by the way, did you know that not all reports and not all perpetrators go to courts, because the law has steps from the police to the prosecutors and to the court, and from that we filter which one is sexual harassment and which one is not. Getting onto my rebuttal, the second rebuttal, the Prime Minister stated that the Prime Minister of the opposition side of the House has stated that the law should be equal, but the amount of to prove a single crime is enormous. It is making the burden on the victim and making it easy for the perpetrators and work easily with the crime. And did you know that the symbol of the law itself, the Unani goddess, is Themis? And she closed her eyes as the symbol, of a law itself is equal for everyone. But that is not the case in the current status quo, where we're putting the burden on the victim. Also, the government side of the house also stated that some by lowering the amount can increase false accusation and using the law. But the government side of the house have failed to engage with our point that we are lowering the amount and we are lifting the burden from the victim, but we did not take the quality of evidence itself. The law that exists once again does not protect the victim, and therefore that is not enough. Therefore, it's not enough, because in the current status quo, sexual harassment is very high and a growing problem in the society, which proves the law is still not enough. The the law still need correction, and based on the current status quo, it is justified to lower the amount of evidence, not the quality on and the quality itself, and the quality in order to lower the crime itself and protect the victim. Also, in the cancel culture, in its current status quo, it sometimes doesn't really make sense, because in the cancel culture, the perpetrator is someone who become famous or even appear in national television, like Saiful Jamil, for example. The clash point on our tonight's debate is whether it is justified to lower the standard of the evidence to prove sexual harassment is being done. The government side of the house has proved you that lowering the amount of the evidence will protect the victim, and it is justified because we can make the law align with the purpose with the law itself. The opposition side of the house has failed to understand that and engage with our point that lowering the amount can actually increase the quality of the evidence, and we not just drag someone into jail by one only by one or two evidence. And I stated again, law has steps, not just someone report and the perpetrators go to jail. There are investigation and law enforcement to prevent that, to prevent false accusation to happen, to prevent the point that the opposition side of the house has already stated. And that is why this motion should stand, and that is why the government side of the house win tonight's debate. Thank you.
Okay, the third speaker from the government team spent 7 minutes and 20 seconds. I call upon the third speaker from the opposition team, Ms. Janetta. You may start your speech.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
So my POI preference would be by Zoom raise hand or from chat, either is fine. And I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, I feel like the government side actually are hurting themselves by saying they would lower the amount of evidence that needed, but not lowering the quality. Because what this debate is based on is lower the standard of evidence. By lowering the amount of evidence that are trivial and not in certain quality, which they did not even define what are their quality, which make this debate totally unclear, because there is no stated quality, because quality is uncertain and law is something that is certain and should be agreed upon by everyone, and quality is something that are different by people and people, from people to people. And and like my first speaker have already stated, by lowering the amount of evidence that are given, it actually takes away the power of people who don't have that enough evidence of a quality, because by lowering the amount of evidence, it takes their power away from giving such trivial things that could be seen, because nowadays most people or even therapists can see people's future behavior by just this small things, and trivial things should not be looked upon just because it is not in the same quality. And like my second speaker have also stated, if you don't and so I will move on to my classes. For my first classes, my first class is I have 2 classes. My first class is it urgent to lower the quality of the evidence? And first of all, I feel like this it is totally not urgent for us to lower this standard of quality, because like the first speaker of the government team have said, people are still skeptical about this crime. This sexual harassment crime is not seen upon as something that is real. And if you bring upon such small cases that don't have enough evidence to back it up, how can people believe that this crime actually exists? Because the point of law is to make everyone believe this perpetrator is doing a bad thing. If that evidence in itself is of a lower standard, how can people agree on this? Oh, sexual harassment is a true thing. And if they say they would lower the amount of quality and lower the amount of evidence required, how can you make people know that what are the quality that is needed? That is something that is need to be agreed upon, because nowadays the real problem of sexual harassment cases is the fact that those evidence that are brought out to court are not substantial enough to bring forth the problem of sexual harassment. Therefore, by not having a substantial evidence, it makes people think that this victim of sexual harassment is actually just victimizing herself, even though there is a possibility that sexual harassment exists. People don't believe in that because those evidence are not substantial enough. And next, I will move to my next classes, which is what are the worst cases that can happen in both sides. So from the government side, they agree upon the case of false accusation, which is a very horrible thing and they believe that they could sacrifice this false accusation just to make sure that more people that are being sexually harassed will be okay. But you have to know that sexual harassment case is such a real and creepy case, and it is now even brought out by everyone in our country that it is a very creepy case. You have to realize, if you falsely accuse someone, you may take their whole entire life. And how is that okay to be sacrificed just because people don't have enough evidence that you don't even know are true or not? You don't even know if those sexual harassment cases are true or not. Well, you agree upon falsely accused people will be okay to be sacrificed. Falsely accusement of sexual harassment is such a creepy thing that it could ruin everybody's life. It could ruin even the most remarkable, like you've said before, even teachers of university. Their lives could be ruined just because this false accusation. And not only do you ruin that one person's life, you could also ruin their whole entire family just because of that false accusation. You think families of people that are being falsely accused of sexual harassment would be just okay in society? No, they'll be looked down upon. You could even kill their entire family. And how do you think that is okay? And next is from our cases, that the worst case that could possibly happen is sexual harassment cases can still be happening but not being proven in court. But ladies and gentlemen, you have to realize that even if it is not proven in court, cancel culture is a very prevalent thing. It is widely known, and it is used in all layers of society, not just famous people. Because maybe you don't know about those cancel culture, and because you only know about things that are in the internet. But even in small towns, if you are being cancelled, cancel culture does not only mean people that are cancelled in Twitter or something like that. It means that people that are being looked bad upon because of social pressure. Social pressure is what will help. It is what that will punish this sexual harassment people, because in our opinion, the opposition side, we believe that it is way better to believe in something that are substantial and something that are truly can be seen upon, rather than believing that believing in something that are still that are still confusing and you don't know the truth about. By falsely accusing someone, you could ruin not just their one life, which they say that is okay to sacrifice a person's life. You have to realize false accusation ruin everybody's life, even the sexual harassed victims, because who are the real perpetrator? You don't know who the real perpetrator is because other people are being falsely accused, and therefore we believe that you should not lower the standard of evidence required. And from the government team, we also do not hear the clear understanding on what they will lower and what quality do they propose. Thank you.
Okay, the third speaker from the opposition team spent 7 minutes and 25 seconds. I call upon the reply speaker from the opposition team, Mr. Hussi. The floor is yours.
Give me a moment. Okay, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, standing here as the reply speaker for the opposition of the House, will give my reply speech towards today's debate, ladies and gentlemen. But first, let me give some characterization into this debate, ladies and gentlemen. Note that the government side of the House is until now is over idealizing about how lowering this evidence they can get more quality evidence to prove the guilt that is made by one people. In this case, we say that sexual harassment. They didn't talk more about it on how lowering this evidence they can get more quality evidence, ladies and gentlemen. We said that. Meanwhile, in government side, in our side, in opposition side of the House, we give you more contextualized world, ladies and gentlemen, where we involve every stakeholders that is possible, and we believe that it could give justice towards the law, the stakeholders, and everyone in our world, ladies and gentlemen. Now, first, there are 3 clashes that are found in this debate, ladies and gentlemen. First, the clashes of our mechanism, ladies and gentlemen. We are talking about the quality of our mechanism here, ladies and gentlemen. The government side of the House proposed that lowering evidence can get more quality, can get more qualified or a better quality of evidence, ladies and gentlemen, to be proven in court, ladies and gentlemen. But we didn't see that how the government elaborate on this, on how significantly they will lower this the number of evidence into the point they can get this more quality evidence in the first place, ladies and gentlemen. They didn't elaborate on that, ladies and gentlemen, and they didn't explain more about this quality that they met and this significantly that they met, ladies and gentlemen. And meanwhile, in the opposite side of the House, we've told you how this quality of evidence is somewhere equals the amount of evidence that is provided towards the court in the hearing, ladies and gentlemen. We say that the amount of evidence is equal to the quality of evidence because the amount of evidence can prove to you, as my first speaker said, can prove to you the different perspective of this evidence that is provided to prove whether if this guy is guilty, if this people is guilty or not, ladies and gentlemen, into the court. That's why in this mechanism clashes, the opposition gets a point, ladies and gentlemen. Now, second clashes about justification, ladies and gentlemen. In the government world, ladies and gentlemen, they only state that it is justified for only the victim, ladies and gentlemen. The victim, when they are implementing their law, lowering the evidence, they are only benefiting one people, ladies and gentlemen, while they are sacrificing all of the others people around the world, ladies and gentlemen. It can be a very many possibility, ladies and gentlemen. We say like that because if one people trying to accuse the whole country about this the sexual harassment that is big for her, like the whole country has big sexual harassment for them, we say that there is bad, ladies and gentlemen. That's why we say that the law in their world is not justice enough to prove whether somebody is the evidence that is provided for somebody which is significantly lower can provide justice towards in their world, ladies and gentlemen. Meanwhile, in the opposition side of the House, instead we are sticking to the status quo, which we believe the law is doing its work, ladies and gentlemen. It needs a process because it is a complex system in the first place. It has done its work. It is enough in the first place, gentlemen. Not only the law, we also have other social pressures such as cancel culture, like my second speaker said, like my first and second speaker said, and LSM such as rehabilitation aid and an organization that upholds this, that handle the case, that upholds the justice towards the sexual harassment, ladies and gentlemen. Now, third, I'll be talking about that's why we win this class of justification, ladies and gentlemen. The third class, I'll be talking about the outcome, ladies and gentlemen. In the government world, we say that the best case scenario will be yes, we believe every predator that is doing this sexual harassment will be caught. And but remember, the worst case, we say that would be every people in the country will be the tersangka of the sexual harassment cases, ladies and gentlemen. Meanwhile, in the opposition side of the house, we have justified to you why is it better to sticking in the law in the first place, and the best case scenario also is not exclusive only in their side, but it is also in our side, which every predator will get justice and every victim will get justice. But we are not sacrificing a certain type of people, ladies and gentlemen. That's why in this case we wins. After all my speech, we still champions the motion. We still oppose the motion, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
The reply speaker from the opposition team spent 4 minutes and 33 seconds. I call upon the reply speaker from the government team, Mr. Jeffrey. The floor is yours.
Okay, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, here's the problem. The opposition side of the house said that people will not believe in the victim and sexual cases and sexual harassment cases. So the less evidence should not so the less evidence standards should not stand, right? But because in the end people will still question it, why does it have less evidence, right? But here's the thing, it is that we as law, we should stand with the victims protection, right? And we protect the victims how? By we lower the quantity of evidence that need to bring up to the court, so that they can have an easier time to bring this up to court, so that their appeal will be accepted, right? Well, in their case, in the opposition side of the house, they believe that it is already enough. But the problem here is that the victims still lack evidences when they are actually genuinely being a victim, right? And this is exactly what the government side of the house want to prevent, right? So in this debate, there are two cases. The first one is about justification, and the second one is about urgency, right? So in the justification class, the opposition side of the house talk about how it is not justified for us to, for example, like lower the evidence standard, right? Because it will make so many people being falsely accused, and it harms their life, it destroys their life. But here's the problem, right? In our side of the house, we have already talked about our mechanism. That is, they also only talk about the quality. But here's the problem: we have already talked about it in our mechanism. We will only, in the current status quo, the victims have to, example, like bring up evidences, for example, like chat, video, or maybe saksi mata, for example. But in our case, they will only have to bring up chat, for example, that has a clear name of the perpetrator, for example, a sign that the perpetrator actually sexually harassed the victim, right? So here, but why is that the case, right? Because in the current status quo, it is very hard for the victims to get evidences, for example, like because the perpetrator hides the evidences very well, for example. And this is exactly what we are trying to protect, right? We are trying to help them to be able to bring this up to court, for example. But here's the thing: just because we lower the quantity of the evidence needed doesn't mean that we will lower the quality as well, right? We never talk about it, we never said about. But and not only that, we also talk about how by lowering the quantity, they don't have to bring up more evidences, which is hard for them, right? But not only that, they also talk about how the people there are people who will be falsely accused. But here's the problem: we
we don't immediately take any kind of evidences, no matter how bad they are, right? We still see how good they are. For example, victim A bring up one evidences, but it is very clear, while victim B or victim B bring up three evidences, but they are all bad and not clear. Like so obviously we will protect the victim A by proving that by proving that the accused is guilty. But in victim B case, they will not be accepted and they will still be deemed as a bad evidence. Right? This is exactly the problem with the current debate, right? So we as the government outside of the house, we have also talk about how the law's purpose to protect the victim, give deterrence so no further crimes happens, and bring awareness, and also about utilitarian concept, which the opposition side of the house have never engaged as well. They never talk about why it is still better to protect a few people who will be falsely accused rather than protect the many people who are actually victim of sexual harassment. And then the second question about urgency is that they don't see they think that the current status quo is already enough, but we still think that it is still very hard for victims to bring up the evidences to court because they still don't have enough evidences, and that's why we believe that this motion should stand. Thank you.
Okay, the reply speaker from the government team spent 4 minutes and 40 seconds. That is the end of the debate. As this debate is a silent round, the debaters may proceed to the debaters hall for the breaking announcement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, DTE.
Thank you all.
Thank you.